This is the Cats Roundtable with John Catsimatidis.
Everywhere around the world, they come to America. Every time that flag's unfurled, they come to America.
Good morning, America. This is the Cats Roundtable. John Catsimatidis here. A great show for you today. Lynn Shaw about protecting our children. Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Roger Marshall. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich. Dr. Peter Michalos. General John Tykert. Congressman Brian Mast. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Steve Cates. Dr. Sky. Michael Cohen. And he wants to talk about what happened with the president's speech. Let's start off with Dr. Mehmet Oz. Calling back today, Dr. Mehmet Oz. What's going on with all the fraud, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Dr. Oz, give us an update.
Well, today's a good day to go to church, and when you're at church, you learn about being righteous and how you take care of your neighbor, and that's how we're judged as a society, how we take care of those who are most vulnerable amongst us, and we are not doing as well as one would hope because of the fraud. And if you're thinking about this problem the right way, you will acknowledge that the best thing we can do to protect folks who are struggling is to make sure they get access to the resources that we have provided them. As a great people, we've created over the last 60 years these beautiful social safety net programs of Medicaid and Medicare, but they are being defrauded. And they're being hurt oftentimes by foreign governments or foreign-run criminal syndicate organizations. And right in New York, Nick, Shirley, and I spent some time investigating what's going on in Queens and Brooklyn. Now, in these boroughs, they have these programs, especially in parts like Flushing, Queens, where there's a large Chinese and Korean population that has immigrated to this country. And they have a culture of getting together in what are called social adult daycare centers, where you sort of get together, you play mahjong or bridge or tai chi, or you hang out a little bit, right? Many societies do that for their elderly. They have a place to stay. Normally, the government doesn't pay for it. In New York, because New Yorkers are so kind, they created a mechanism to pay for these programs. And what ends up happening, and these are run, we believe, under the auspices of the Chinese organized criminal groups that are also doing human trafficking in the East Coast, they have managed to basically own the Medicare beneficiary cards of the seniors that go there. Let me explain that. You're an older person. You go to this club. You say, hey, what do you got for me? And the owner says, I'll give you $1,000 a month. You pretend that you come here every day. I need your Medicare beneficiary number. It's like a credit card number that Medicare gives you. Give me that number, and I'll just go off and do what you want to do. I take that number, if I'm the owner. They start to charge fake things against that number. They pretend they're sending this really expensive wheelchair. They pretend that they're sending expensive branded medications. They're scheduling appointments they never go to, tests they never get, treatments they don't receive or don't need. And they begin to bankrupt all the legitimate people because they make so much money, they buy up the entire business. We believe most of these programs that have generated $2.1 billion against New York Medicaid, which, of course, I have to reimburse because I run Medicaid at the federal level, is being stolen. And just to put it in context, the entire state of New York uses only $400 million. So these guys have $2.1 billion in two boroughs. And we have, with Nick Shirley, been investigating these guys. These videos are all over social media. You're welcome to show, or listen to clips if you desire in the show, but people should just check them out. You can't look away from these fraudulent activities. They bought up all the pharmacies. There were a dozen pharmacies on one block. Why? They're all fake. They're taking these Medicare beneficiary numbers and manufacturing huge businesses to fund illegal activities. These bankrupt our society, and we are pressuring New York State to look seriously at these programs, and because these are run by the state. We reimburse, but the state actually creates and runs these programs, and it's, to me, representative of what we're seeing in other parts of the country. We have twice as many durable medical equipment suppliers in South Florida than McDonald's, and that's often run by Cuban nationals, and we believe the Cuban government.
The last time we and you talked, There was a big, big difference in Medicaid. It's Medicaid from Florida to New York. One was 25 billion, and the other one was 125 billion in New York.
New York has the highest per capita spend on Medicaid by far in the country. New York has developed a plan. They call it Medicaiding it. By that, they mean we're going to take an expense that the state should pay for, and we're going to dump it on Medicaid. Because although New York is spending a lot more per person on Medicaid, New Yorkers are not paying the bill. They're paying part of it, but the federal government's paying most of it. And so it's not really a flaw for the governor of New York. It's a feature. Why? Because if I take somebody and pay them to carry their groceries upstairs for their parents, which we are doing in New York State, the number one job in New York State, by a factor of 2, is people who do that. They're called personal care service individuals. They're basically people who are living in the neighborhood, maybe your kids, doing simple tasks for other people living in the neighborhood, and we're paying them. Like, these are things your family would normally do for you for free. But when you pay for them, the state says, I had someone who was unemployed. Now I can employ them and charge the federal government. I mean, how brilliant is that? So now it's a jobs program. And I'll add one more thing to it. We've learned that the unions are now unionizing these people, which means the federal government is paying salaries that go to union dues, and then the union dues fund the campaigns of the Democrats in the state. So now you have political patronage on top of a jobs program. So, John, you tell me, isn't that a really smart thing to do if you're leading the state of New York?
Well, and it looks like it's a benefit that they give all the people to keep themselves. New York is like 70% or 60% Democratic, and it's using the federal government money to do that.
Using the federal government as a piggy bank. The problem is that if every state does this, there's no more money left in the federal government. And guess who does it better than New York? California. And so you now begin to realize there's a run on the bank. If the federal government's not willing to clean things up, this is what happens. The congressmen who voted to support the working families tax cut legislation, in that law, they stopped the legalized money laundering that was taking place by states. What the law says is that we are making sure that whatever the president is trying to do to help the country, any president, is the same basic goal that the governors of the states should have. And so if we're going to spend money on health care, the money should be spent in the way everyone's agreed, which is the federal government pays a little bit, the states pay a little bit, and then we have enough money to take care of our most vulnerable. That has been perverted. And because of that, every state is trying to grab as much money as they can without paying their fair share. And some states are better at it than others. But eventually, every state gets good at it. And so when that happens, there's no more money left to take. And all of a sudden, the whole bottom falls out. The corrupt fraud is not just fraud. It's fraud that's arising because government wants it to exist. And that is why we've ended up where we are. In addition to the fact that during COVID, we taught criminal organizations that the federal government is a pretty good piggy bank.
We got another minute left. What would you like to say to all our listeners?
Well, the best news I can give everybody right there is we have an all-of-government approach. The president has, during the State of the Union, asked the vice president to run the White House Anti-Fraud Task Force. What that means is that Treasury and Commerce and my agency, Health and Human Services and Medicare, Medicaid, and all the different elements of the government are all pulling the oars in the same direction. I'll give you one concrete example. If we find or suspect that someone is stealing from Medicaid, you know what we do with that person's number? We give it to the IRS. And here's what we say. This person we think is stealing from Medicaid. If they're willing to steal from our most vulnerable, they're probably not paying their taxes. Check it. And although they can't tell us what they find, they shouldn't, and they don't, it is helpful for us to be able to pass along this information so we can see if they're cheating other parts of government. Because if you steal from one part of government, you'll go ahead and steal from all parts, because what you really are saying is, I don't care about America. I'm just going to take advantage of this piggy bank, take advantage of the American people, and I'm here to say no mas. Secretary Kennedy, me, under the leadership of the president and vice president, no more. We are watching you, and if you're hearing this broadcast right now, don't just walk away from us. Start running, because we're coming after you.
Dr. Mehmet Oz, thank you for what you do for our government and what you do for all Americans, and thank you so much.
God bless you, my friend. Take care.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Michael Cohen. I guess he was an attorney for President Donald Trump. President Trump gave a great speech the other night, and I'd like to get your comments on it.
One of the things that I intend to talk about on my show, which is coming up at 5 p.m., When You Know, You Know, and something that I wrote in my Substack. What really bothers me the most here, John, is that I've spent enough time around Washington to know one true thing, and that's the loudest voices rarely care about the truth. I want you to think for a second. At some point in time, before the president even finished his speech, before he was even halfway through the speech, they were already out there turning around and knocking him. They completely ignored a comment that the president made, which was, and I'm going to quote it, "If there can be no trust, there can be no greatness." That fact is hard to disagree with. In fact, you can't. Right? I mean, if there can be no trust, there can be no greatness. How do you argue with that? Instead, you had every single talking head, whether it was on the far left side or even some that were just slightly left of center, attacking the president on something which cannot be refuted.
I mean, there was so many things that happened. All the problems he's having with China, with those, what was it? How many votes? 22 million or 22,000? Or what was it, 220,000?
Yeah, 220,000. You know, he's got a specific point that he's trying to drill home.
But China is also fentanyl coming from Mexico.
Sure, well, China is the manufacturer of the fentanyl.
And
coming
also so many other things. I mean, there's a whole list of things that me and you talked about. Buying all that land next to our military bases, agriculture, spying. The fact is, the baby factories they have,
and the theft of intellectual property rights here in America,
and I guess placing professors in schools. That becomes a problem.
Of course it does, because their goal is to change our ideology. Their goal is to change how America looks at itself. Trump is 100% right when he turns around and says that China is not just our biggest adversary. Their goal is to take America apart every single day. And they do that as well through manipulation. When they control the data, you then control the vote. When you start having China, for example, paying American institutions or individuals to promote false information, and they do it with such a ferocity that people cannot get away from this newfound fact. That's all people start talking about. So you don't need to use a firearm. You just need to use media.
And the same thing is all that. Who is that Chinese American billionaire? Is China funneling a lot of money through him? Well, possible.
I mean, anything is possible. But where Trump is right on point, we cannot allow elections to become manipulated or corrupted. And that's not to say that, for example, these machines, that everything Trump said was 100% accurate. What he's saying is that our system, our electoral system, how we go about our elections, they're compromised. What's the problem, John? You're a businessman. You've been a businessman your entire life. If something is not 100% right, what do? You try to fix it to make it 100% right. What's wrong with Trump saying that our system, like our immigration system, needs revamping? That was basically the essence of the message that I took from Thursday's commentary by the president. That we need to look into it and we need to fix it because it is broken, plain and simple.
Tell us, you're going to be on at 5 o'clock tonight, Sunday night?
Yes, I am.
Who are you having on tonight?
So the 5 o'clock show, When You Know, You Know, is going to start with Alan Dershowitz, our constitutional law guru. Then it's going to be followed by General Holt, We're going to talk about Iran and what's going on there, followed finally by Brian Karam, who is a 40-year journalist, and those conversations get very heated and very explosive. So rest assured, it's not going to be something anyone's going to want to miss.
Well, I look forward to listening to it, and I'll listen to you at 5 o'clock.
Well, I look forward to that. Thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. Chairman Brian Mast, the U.S. representative from Florida's 21st Congressional District, and also chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. So many things going on in foreign affairs. I mean, can you sort things out for us?
What we're sorting out right now is obviously everything going on with Iran, the most untrustworthy regime anywhere across the globe. And they're proving to be what we've always known them to be, this regime that will do everything to lie, everything to destroy the United States of America, our ally Israel. And as they're proving, all of their neighbors in the Gulf, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Jordan, anybody that they can strike, everybody's realizing how foolish it was to even consider for a second that they could move any closer to a nuclear weapon with just what they're doing with drones and ballistic missiles. Everybody is becoming very clear-eyed about the threat that President Trump knew them to be from day one.
The Chinese, how badly are they affecting our economy? How badly are they affecting our drugs that are coming in? I just felt that they're interfering with our education department in our universities, the fentanyl in Mexico, the babies that they're having in California. I understand there's hundreds of different homes, and we did a whole story on that, with 40 Chinese women in it having babies.
What could we add to that list? We could add to they steal every bit of intellectual property that they can from any American company. They're literally smuggling the best chips anywhere made on the globe, American chips in any way they can, into their country through all these shell corporations. They do that so that they can steal the models that are made by companies like Anthropic, these AI models that are made. They, you already mentioned the universities, but anywhere that they can conduct espionage into our banking system, into our utilities, into our Department of War, that is what they want to do. So anybody that thinks that they don't want to do the same thing to our elections, or they weren't trying to, is being entirely naive about this, that China would all of a sudden be, well, we'll do all of this espionage, but we wouldn't do it to their elections. They are absolutely trying our elections. They've been an adversary for a long time. They brought COVID on the entire earth, and that was absolutely on purpose, which the president was telling us about even back then. But you had people like Nancy Pelosi saying, you can't call it the China virus. President always calls things for what they are. He calls the balls and strikes, and that's exactly what he was doing last night, calling the balls and strikes and saying, hey, we're not going to allow them to interfere in our elections. Here's all the vulnerabilities that we have, and that's going to be taken care of for this midterm.
Congressman, I understand Boeing has been, a lot of intellectual rights have been stolen by China, and they're stealing other intellectual rights from other companies. Has Congress been on top of that?
The coercion that takes place by China is not new, and it usually follows two very specific patterns. So sometimes the coercion goes like this. They steal any of the intellectual property that they can, then they copy it, then they bring a similar, maybe in many cases exactly the same product to market. They sell it in the market significantly cheaper than what is the real market price. They destroy the U.S. or the European company that legitimately developed that intellectual property. And once they destroy them, then there's nothing but room for the Chinese company that stole it and copied it. Or the other way that they do it is they make these corporations, they say, listen, if you want to work in China, that's fine. We're happy to have you. But you have to have a Chinese headquarters. And when you have a Chinese headquarters, you have to have all of your servers with all of your information, all of your intellectual property. That all has to be located inside of China as well. And then once it's in China, they have the keys to the kingdom, and they steal all of the intellectual property and go through all of the steps that I just laid out.
What else would you like to tell the people?
Let's bring Iran, back into this for a moment. So what is taking place with Iran actually is really just an escalation of what has been the status quo for decades. A lot of people don't know it, but Iran was attacking as many ships as they could going in and out of the Straits of Hormuz long before Operation Epic Fury ever took place. They were attacking America long before Epic Fury took place. We lost 3 Americans a year and a half ago in a place called Tower 22 in Jordan by the hand of Iran because it was just another day for them that they wanted to attack Americans. If you contacted Lloyd's of London, who does all of the underwriting, the insurance underwriting, every single ship that goes through the Straits of Hormuz for years before they go in the Straits, they get an insurance policy. When they're on their way out of the Straits, they get an insurance policy from a company like Lloyd's of London. Why? Because it's always been that risk. What they are doing is elevating that risk. And President Trump, again, President Trump has been the first president to say, no, we're not going to accept that as the status quo. This isn't going to continue any further. They're not going to attack us. We're going to bring that to an end, and we're going to do everything to bring that to an end. And, of course, it makes absolutely no sense for them to have any kind of nuclear weapons because they just hold us all hostage with those as well in the same way that they're trying to do right now.
Congressman Brian Mast, I want to thank you for coming on, and let's catch up again real soon.
Anytime, my friend.
The Cats Roundtable.
With us today is Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, represents the 24th Congressional District in New York. Congresswoman, how did you feel about the president's speech on Thursday night? How do you feel about the Voting Act?
It was a very important speech that the president gave. Obviously, voter integrity is really important. I know that intimately. I've had tough elections, including my election of 2020, where I spent 100 days in court. I was winning by 28,422 votes and ended up only winning by 109 and didn't get sworn into Congress until February of 2021. It was kind of a crazy situation.
I didn't realize, it's been so many years already, I didn't realize that had happened to you. In other words, did you feel like something was going on behind your back?
Of course. We know that under the pandemic, there was no way to track some of these things. There were no safeguards in place for voters, especially in New York, where we have these people who you can register voters, you can register illegal immigrants. They're on their honor. They can go to the DMV, they can get a license, and while they're at the tablet, they can sit there and they can say, the tablet says, "Would you like to register to vote?" And you press yes. Remember, the person behind the counter doesn't know what you're doing. It's a confidential tablet, and you're on your honor. You can say yes. What party would you like to register in? You press that button, and then you press send, and you're all registered to vote in New York State. And this is not safeguarding that it's a citizen that's voting, which, by the way, which is really important, John, is everybody's talking about this, and I know the president's talking about Save America. The state of New York, the Democrats down in New York City tried to get non-citizens eligible for votes. This went all the way to the Court of Appeals, the top court in New York. All liberal judges, appointed by either Governor Cuomo or Governor Hochul right now, they determined in the Court of Appeals, the highest state court, the highest court in the state of New York, one of the most important courts in the nation, said only citizens can vote in our election based on our state law, our state constitution, and our federal law. So that is really important for people to know. From the Democrats say, we don't want, to have any kind of proof that citizens vote, and we don't need to have ID. The Court of Appeals says that. A left-leaning Court of Appeals says that. Most voters agree with that. So, we're kind of fighting over the fact that the Democrats don't like this because President Trump has put that out there. So, yes, we need to safeguard our elections. We're the United States of America. I went down to Honduras. I've said this before in your show as an election observer last November. They have voter ID. They have proof of citizenship. They have proof of precinct. They have biometrics that prove that when you go to the voter rolls and you go to the right precinct, They match that up. You have to prove that you live there. You have to prove you're eligible to vote in that precinct, and they make sure of that by having an ID. So, if a country like Honduras, an emerging country and a poor nation, can do that, we can certainly do that in the United States. It should be 100% issue by both Democrats and Republicans, but because President Trump is pushing this, the Democrats immediately reject it, and also they want to continue to cheat in elections. It's just that simple. It's not, oh, well, we're going to, disenfranchise voters. Absolutely ridiculous. That is not only misogynist, it's racist.
They're saying women can't vote. They're saying that blacks can't vote. I mean, that is racist.
Absolutely. And then saying that women who can't vote because they've got to get an ID, because they've been married and maybe they had to change their name. I was born Claudia Tenney. I became Claudia Cleary. When I got divorced, I went back to my maiden name. I had to carry my divorce decree around with me for years to prove that I was indeed Claudia Tenney and it matched my birth certificate. Anybody can do that. Every woman is capable of doing that. This is absurd. But this is an important point. President Trump wanted to show that there is a possibility, especially when you deal with electronic voting machines and you don't have safeguards in place, that there can be foreign interference in our elections. He highlighted the fact that the Chinese were creating fake, licenses and shipping them to the United States. Huge numbers were coming in, and there is a huge opportunity to take advantage of our elections if we're not secure. And I think it's important. I would have loved to have seen someone from the Department of Justice, say Harmeet Dillon, deliver that message to America. Maybe you have President Trump hand that off to her because she's fighting this fight and she's an amazing advocate. It would have been really important to see someone in law enforcement there with Harmeet Dillon to show that this is a serious issue and this is something that law enforcement is taking seriously and doing. I would have loved to have seen that. The president, didn't do that, but maybe next time we'll get Harmeet or some of these other key players to show that it's important. And by the way, this is important for administration of elections for each state and each local government. And, I think it's going to be interesting to see where the Democrats fall on this, but there's absolutely no reason why this shouldn't be a slam dunk.
Claudia Tenney, thank you for your wisdom. Thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks. Great talking to you. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. With us today is Brigadier General John Tykert. General, you heard President Trump's speech on Thursday night. What did you think?
John, the thing that struck me the most is that there is a comprehensive, holistic attempt by the Chinese Communist Party to undermine the core of our republic, and I'm very concerned about it. He made a great case, and I think that the focus going forward needs to be on some of the domestic elements that covered that up, but really the biggest thing that we need to do is find a way to punish China for their activities that are striving to undermine the core of our democracy.
President Trump said it the right way with Iran. 47 years of getting screwed by Iran, and China, I'm not sure they're much better.
No, I actually don't think that they are. And again, I think that they are trying in every way possible, in fact, using a strategy that they developed about 47 years ago called unrestricted warfare to undermine us as a country. I'm extremely concerned about it. And here's just a data point, John. There are 200,000 Chinese students currently in American universities. Their number one priority is to steal American intellectual property. Why we continue to allow Chinese students to populate key locations around our country in American universities is beyond me. They're doing it to undermine us, and we need to stop it now.
Let's move on to Iran. Are we ever going to solve this problem?
I am hopeful, John, that the president now has promised expanded military operations against Iran starting next week. I realize he's made that promise before, but I finally think that Iran has so taken advantage of the president's goodwill and patience that he's sick and tired of it. And that means that he's going to follow through on these promises, I hope, to start attacking power plants and bridges and logistical lines and transportation nodes. And I think if we do that and map each of those targets to strategically significant points, then we will start to get attention of the regime in a way that can bend them to our will.
Russia and Ukraine, who do you trust less?
Well, I trust Russia far less. That I think Ukraine, first of all, they didn't start this war, but they actually are doing very well against a determined adversary that is unwilling to stop. Putin started this 4.5 years ago, and while there are some reasons to be concerned about Zelensky and Ukraine, that they are defending themselves brilliantly, Russia is unwilling to stop, even though it's driving their economic system into the ground. You know, the Russian central bank not too long ago said that their economic outlook is dismal, their future is bleak, and for some reason Putin doesn't understand it's in his best interest to stop, but he's the aggressor here. We've got to always remember that, which is why it is reasonable for us to continue to support Ukraine in a sustainable way. And I think because they're starting to gain territory and take the fight to the Russian economy, that they're going to ultimately succeed, whether Putin realizes it or not.
Now, just before you retired, you were with Space Command. Anything the American people should know about Space Command? Are they moving forward? Tell us what's going on there.
Well, John, there is going to be a new chief of space operations soon. It's going to be the third one. You know, Space Force started as a force in December of 2019. So they're fairly new, but they're going to have their third senior general as General Saltzman retires. And I'm excited as they're looking to double the size of their force. They're looking to double their budget. And it's important for your listeners to understand, John, that space is a contested domain. Everything we do in a military sense and an economic sense in this country is highly reliant on our ability to operate in space. Space Force is there to protect that national right, and I'm excited as we see a third new general as the Chief of Space Operations and the Chief of Space Force, that he's going to carry on a legacy that started under President Trump 1 in 2019 as a separate military service.
Brigadier General Teichert, thank you for everything you've done for our country, and we'll catch up again real soon.
John, I always love being on with you. Keep having me back anytime.
The Cats Roundtable.
The former Speaker, Newt Gingrich, is with us. And Newt, the other day in the Congress, 100 congressmen in the Democratic Party voted against giving arms to Israel. Has the Socialist Party taken over the Democratic Party?
In all honesty, you now have a big government socialist party with weird values. And just take that phrase, and if the average American, if we could get every American to understand, like the old Oldsmobile commercial years ago, you know, this is not your father's Democratic Party. This has now become, and you saw that the senator from Pennsylvania has suggested he might well leave the party if it becomes an anti-Israel party. And I think you're going to see more of this kind of thing, because what's happening is it's a combination. Big government socialism has been here a long time. In many ways, Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, all the things that Obama did, the things that Biden did, created bigger bureaucracy, higher taxes, more government controls. But in the last 30 years, we've added a weird values component that's really strange. In that the average American, you know, the simplest example is whether or not men should participate in women's sports. And overwhelmingly, the average American believes that women should have the opportunity to compete without having somebody who was born as a male, who is physically bigger, stronger, and more powerful, basically eliminate women's sports. I mean, if you have enough men claiming to be female, you literally will end women's sports for all practical purposes. Well, the average American gets that. Now, if you're part of the weird values Democratic Party, you're shocked at the idea that we would discriminate against a 6'7" male who happened to be born male just because he wants to wrestle with women. And they have a internal model that the weakest people always have to be protected. And so transgenderism, for example, is a very big part of it. But it goes beyond that. We now have Democrat members of Congress. We have a person who just won a primary in New York who said she doesn't actually reach for a napkin if her hand gets dirty. She just wipes it on the U.S. flag. That was a deliberate comment of contempt for the United States. And as I was telling you earlier, John, before we got on the air, I've been fascinated because at the very same day this week, I ran across a new poll in Minnesota, which has the Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate tied with the Democratic candidate. And I ran across a poll in Oregon, which has the Republican candidate tying the incumbent governor in Oregon. Now, these are states that have not elected statewide Republicans for a very long time. So when you start to see those kind of things happening, you begin to wonder about the underlying momentum that is growing out there. I follow a guy named Seth Keshel, who I think is the smartest single analyst in America. He doesn't worry about polling data. He looks at voter registration, and he picked every single one of the swing states accurately in 2024, including New Hampshire, which did not go for Trump. He said it wouldn't. He said it would get closer, but that the underlying voter registration hasn't switched enough yet. Well, in almost all of these states, the migration since then has been towards the Republicans. That says to me that you could have a very different election this fall than people expect.
What I really, really believe, I believe foreign money is influencing and coming into the United States and helping the Democratic Socialists to take over the Democratic Party.
No, I think that's absolutely right, and I think we'll find that out over the next year or two, because you can't have this much money sloshing around, if you will. By the way, we shouldn't chat this Sunday without taking a brief moment to remember our very, very good friend Lindsey Graham. It was an enormous shock for Clifton and me last weekend to wake up and realize that here's a guy who, he came in '94 as part of our freshman class. He was always happy, always positive, always engaged, always had energy, and he was so deeply, passionately committed to America and to America doing well. I just have to say that we will miss him dearly, but all of us who have worked hard to help this country lost a wonderful friend and ally in Lindsey Graham.
Thank you so much, Newt, for calling in. God bless you. God bless America, and we'll catch up again real soon.
Great.
Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. We'll be right back right after this break. Welcome back to the Cats Roundtable. Dr. Peter Michalos with us today, and live long and prosper is our motto. Well, Dr. Michalos, how do we live longer? And listen, I don't worry about prospering. I'm worried about living longer.
Well, John, today we're going to talk about a fascinating topic, and that is Legionnaire's disease. And Legionnaire's disease has become a big problem in some places. As we know, it happened also in New York, in some of the cooling towers and some of the buildings. And Legionnaire's disease is a bacteria. The good news is it does not spread human to human. It grows in these hot water areas where there's cooling tanks in hot weather, and the bacteria grows. And one of the problems is if you don't catch it early, it can cause a severe pneumonia, and you can end up in the ICU, and some people have even died from Legionnaire's disease. And there are solutions, and in places like Florida, what they do is they have ultraviolet C germicidal lamps, and what they do is they kill mold, viruses, and bacteria. The Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1903 was killing skin infections using UVC light, and before antibiotics, that's how they treated sepsis, which is an infection in the blood. They used to let the blood out, zap it with UVC, and put it back in the vessels. Now they use it in aquariums, they use it in dirty ponds, swimming pools even use it, because when you have an inline UV lamp and the water travels through, you don't have to use as much chlorine. And in the early 1900s, after it got the Nobel Prize, it was actually a bunch of actually Greeks who lived in Marseille, France, who came up with the idea, and they started using UVC lamps through these clear glass lamps. So the water supply that people would drink and shower in Marseille, France, they zapped it with UVC. So if you put, like they do in Florida, inside the cooling towers, submersible UVC lamps, and these lamps are like $100. You can buy them on Amazon, actually. They submerge them in the water, and it kills because it disrupts the DNA of viruses, mold, and bacteria. They also put it in the air return handlers and air conditioning system in hospitals, nursing homes, and many of the buildings in Florida have it because it zaps the air. And you and I actually used them during COVID, if you recall, and we were telling others to put it inside their air handlers because it's very inexpensive to do. So you constantly are cleaning the air from all types of air, mold, virus, and bacteria, but specifically now we're worried about Legionnaire's disease. The other thing in Florida, what they do is they do random sample testing and cultures of these cooling towers, and even whirlpool baths and hot tubs. Legionnaires tends to want to grow in those too, and I know of cases where people caught it in hot tubs. And then you just have these UV lamps, or at night when you put the cover, for example, on a hot tub, you have these submersible UV lamps, and they're all night killing all the bad bacteria. So I think every building in Manhattan, an inexpensive, quick solution is install it in the air handlers and all these large buildings, and also put it inside the cooling towers, and also the people who service the cooling towers. If you have dirty hands, or people who go to the bathroom, sometimes they don't wash their hands, and you're cleaning or working on these cooling towers, there should be protocols that people should wear a mask and gloves.
It kills the bacteria and the ultraviolet. Is the same way some of those, during COVID, we had those air filters with the blue light in them. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because it not only is a HEPA filter, but as the air passed by, it got zapped with the blue light, and it killed the bacteria. So this is very important, because when these bacteria spread, they cause problems. The good news is there are antibiotics to treat it, and of course we're in a great New York City and great hospitals like Columbia Presbyterian, New York Hospital, NYU. We have all these great medical centers, Mount Sinai, and we have great access to great care. And fortunately, if you catch it early and you treat it, it can be controlled. But I think that if people adopt
it's relatively inexpensive, right?
Yeah, very inexpensive. The UV bulbs are basically $100, and they already use them in Florida. They can just copy what they do in the buildings in Florida and the cooling towers, and also what a lot of people do in a lot of swimming pool, and even on my, whole house water filter, some people have it. So as the water is coming, for example, people with well water, you can also zap it with this UVC germicidal light. You don't want it to be exposed directly to humans. The reason we don't use it for skin infections, because it can cause cancer, because it's very high energy. But it does kill the bugs and the bad bacteria in the water. It doesn't harm humans when it's not in direct contact with us. And that's just something very important that we want the public to know about, that there are solutions, and to keep listening to learn more health tips on how to live long and prosper.
Dr. Peter Michalos, thank you for your wisdom, and we'll catch up again real soon.
Thank you, John, for always getting the truth out on the Cats Roundtable.
The Cats Roundtable.
Steve Cates, otherwise known as Dr. Sky. What you have in mind?
Well, good morning, John. But here, John, we talk a lot of space stories, but here's one that almost sounds like science fiction. The Earth, from time to time, pulls in some of these small asteroids, and they get classified as mini-moons. Well, here's the headline story this week. There's a small little asteroid, maybe 100 feet in diameter. It was discovered in Hawaii back in 2016, And its Hawaiian name, here we go, and I'm not an expert in the Hawaiian language, but I'll do the best I can. It's officially known as Kamo o Aliwa. And if you translate that from Hawaiian, it means an oscillating celestial object. It rotates every 28 minutes, not going to hurt the Earth by any means. But what's interesting is that China has sent a space probe there called Tianwen-2, and it's actually orbiting this particular little body. Hopefully in the next few months, John, it'll scoop up some material from it, bring it back to Earth, because guess what? Many believe, astronomers, scientists, that this is actually a piece of the moon that was blasted off the surface of the moon maybe millions of years ago through other big impacts that hit the moon.
How big is this thing?
Only about 100 feet in diameter. Isn't that incredible? A little object, 100 feet in diameter.
Yeah.
Gets caught up in kind of the Earth's, gravity. But what's amazing is the Chinese spacecraft, John, is actually going to try to scoop up something. It's going to orbit it for a while to make that precise moment in time. But some believe there's a large crater on the moon called Giordano Bruno. And some believe an asteroidal impact hit it maybe millions, maybe billions of years ago. And we're trying to identify what this material is, but it's two stories in one. That the Earth occasionally gets these mini moons that lock into our orbit, and then they move away.
The dust they pick up from that secondary asteroid, will they be able to tell if it was part of the moon?
I don't know for sure, John. I think chemical analysis, when we went to the moon, we brought back about 840 pounds of moon rocks. And what we found out there is maybe many of those moon rocks are not exactly like that of the Earth, but in this particular case, analyzing it, they will try to find out if there's any facsimile, of course, the organic compounds in there, because apparently where the moon came from, it wasn't out of the Pacific Ocean, as we maybe heard in school when we were younger. It was an object called theoretically an object the size of Mars that hit the Earth and pulled out this big blob of material, thus forming the moon itself. So you don't know. We'll have to wait and see what the analysis is of this little object called Kamo o Aliwa. Hard enough to say twice, don't you think?
What else is the older mysteries of the day?
Well, John, here's something else. It goes back to Earth with companies that are developing space technology, whether it's science fiction or not. Let's start off with a company called Space Mirror. The FCC, this is amazing, just approved Space Mirror, put in these particular big mirrors in space that you'd unfurl, like, a big sheet of aluminum foil type. And that its purpose would beam down sunlight down onto the Earth in a 3-mile area, swatch of material or pattern on the Earth. Now, this is very controversial because the people in astronomy say, oh, no, hell no, we don't want to do that. You're going to ruin the quality of the nighttime sky. But, John, isn't it possible if for certain situations, maybe military purposes or who knows what, you could actually beam down sunlight in a 3-mile area when the rest of the sky is dark and the rest of the Earth is dark? It's a concept, maybe goes science fiction now, but you never know. There may be practical purposes. What say you?
Well, you're absolutely right. There could be some practical purposes. Now, I listen to you every Saturday night, or Sunday morning, and every Friday night for Saturday morning from 12 to 2 Eastern Time.
Well, John, we talk about the mysteries of the universe and also jump into topics of American exceptionalism. But one closing story that I failed to mention here in the short time is another company called Solar Storms. And that's the company called Storm Wall is actually their name. Their purpose would be to put up spacecraft up in the geosynchronous area. That's way up there where the 22,000 miles where the satellites stay, the big ones, in Earth's, stability. And they may inject something called barium and other compounds into the Earth, into what we call the magnetoshield, this big magneto field around the Earth that protects the Earth. Why would they do it? Because their theory states that over time, it could, and I use the word could, maybe deflect some of those solar storms that are being pummeled here when we get pummeled from space. Now, that sounds real science fiction, but you never know, John. I mean, look at 100 years since aviation, more than that. Maybe the things that we think today are science fiction, but it's a real serious company that has some serious plans of maybe doing something to limit the amount of solar storm damage because what, John? Everything is electronic, and we can't afford to lose the grid or the importance of satellites.
Thank you, Steve Cates, and we'll catch up with you again real soon.
Thank you, John. Have a good Sunday.
With us today is Lynn Shaw, lynswarriors.org. Lynn Shaw, tell us what you have in mind today.
Good morning, John. You know what? Health and Human Services, our government, they must do more to protect our kids online, because these phones and social media and now AI, the artificial intelligence, the gaming platforms and messaging apps have created a lot of opportunities, right, for kids. But at the same time, they've created these opportunities for the predators. And it's opened the door to online enticement and this sextortion, exploitation, addictive design. So today, the question really is, I propose to you, and everybody listening, is our government doing enough to protect America's children online? What do you think, John?
I think they could do a much better job. It's the different lobbyist groups. And who are these lobbyist groups that don't want to protect our children?
I'm going to tell you right now, which is why I want Health and Human Services, HHS, that's Secretary, Bobby Kennedy. John, I am sorry, with all due respect, the man has to stop doing pull-ups and push-ups and posting shirtless pictures, and he's catching snakes on somebody's, patio, and they're posting this online. He's got to address helping our children. This is a position we need to take. This is a national crisis. We need to take action. We need Secretary Kennedy to go to our president and do an executive order. We can no longer wait. So I'll tell you who's not acting right now and who these lobbyists are. Every big tech company. We talk about Meta a lot, which is Mark Zuckerberg, and that's Snapchat. That is Instagram, and that is Facebook. But we also have Snapchat and TikTok. All of them have lobbyists employed on Capitol Hill. Now, if you read about this, it'll say, one lobbyist per 6 members of Congress. I've been told it's one lobbyist per every 4 members, spreading their propaganda around about how great big tech is, that kids need it. We've seen the harms caused and parents ripped apart and all these things happening. But there's a lot of money. And I say this all the time, and it's so crass, but money talks and crime walks. So now we need to think. I'm thinking all the time, John, like, what do we do next? What's going to make the difference? The only thing I came up with in the last few days is Secretary Kennedy has to call this a national crisis. He has to put out some reports about this. We have DOJ with reports. We've got everybody, but nobody's all working together to get it to the president. I'm trying as hard as I can try with the warriors. That being said, don't you think that's a good idea? We put this into Health and Human Services.
Our children are very important to almost every American family, so we want the right thing done. You talk about lobbyists, maybe 70% or 60% or 80% of the lobbyists, want to do the wrong thing, but some of them are doing the right thing too.
I would have to almost disagree with that, John, because right now the power and money in Washington is with big tech. They are kind of running everything. Not only do they appeal to our senators, our Congress people, legislative staffs, they are spread all over the place with their money. And remember, when people leave Congress, they want to work. It used to be they traditionally wanted to be on boards of banks and financial institutions and things like that. But now they want to be part of, the AI and the data centers and the big tech money. So I'm going to say, as far as big tech, I'm going to say almost 100% of them. I don't want to say 100% because we never know, but their message is wrong. It is one that disempowers our kids. It empowers our families. It empowers Americans. And, John, we have 30 years now of knowledge. Now we have studies. Now we have stats. It is more harmful than good. So, look, we're pro-innovation, pro-technology at the Warriors, as are many other groups, but we want some guardrails. We want some protections. And if that means, Secretary Kennedy now has to step up to the plate, he's working on red food dyes and all these other things. We've got to work on our people, John. We've got to work on our kids and sound the alarm and protect childhood, protect our American future.
Lynn Shaw, thank you so much, and let's catch up again real soon.
Thank you, John. Take care, and we'll speak again soon.
The Cats Roundtable.
If you ever miss a segment or want to hear it again, go to WABCRadio.com, go to podcasts, go to minicast, and play back your favorite segment. Thank you for listening to the Cats Roundtable. Every Sunday morning, we'll bring you the latest in what's happening in our community, our country, and the world. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Have a nice Sunday.